Professor Alejo Vidal-Quadras, a former Vice President of the European Parliament and a victim of the atrocities of the Iranian dictatorship. The Iran Human Rights and Democracy Caucus is a truly bipartisan caucus representing a majority of the House of Representatives and comprised of both Democrats and Republicans. We differ and quarrel about many things, but we are solidly united in support of the people of Iran and their struggle to liberate themselves from the tyranny of the mullahs. Representing the people of the United States, we proudly stand with the National Council of Resistance and its 10-point plan for a free, secular, and non-nuclear Iran. The bipartisan Iran Human Rights and Democracy Caucus will serve as a forum in which members of Congress may address issues and developments relating to Iran, a country whose disturbing record on human and civil rights, as well as nuclear weapons development, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, support for terrorism, and attempts at regional hegemony are matters of the utmost security and foreign policy concern of the United States. By promoting dialogue and providing a regular flow of information, the Iran Human Rights and Democracy Caucus will seek to shape U.S. policy on Iran and provide members of Congress with documentation based on a range of viewpoints, including official U.S. and other governmental sources, non-governmental organizations, Iranian dissident groups, and leaders of the Iran-American community. We can all sense that the tide is turning. The Iranian regime has become a pariah among the civilized nations of the world and a supreme source of misery, injustice, and oppression for its own people. Such a state of things cannot last much longer, and I believe events are coming to a head. It's not inconceivable to me that within the next few years, we will be celebrating the liberation of Iran. In a few moments, when he arrives, I'll introduce the co-chairman of this caucus, the Democratic representative from Tennessee, Mr. Stephen Cohen. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and proceed. The forum will be in two parts. First, we'll hear from Mrs. Rajavi, and our members will engage with her, and then we'll hear from Professor Vidal-Quadras. Now it's my honor to introduce the leader of the Iranian opposition, the president. Oh. I'm pleased to be here. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Congressman Brad Sherman of California, who is the co-author of our House resolution, which I'll mention at the end of our meeting. But welcome, and I'll certainly introduce you, or recognize you.
Okay. I won't take long. I'm torn. On the one hand, we've got the whole intel community is going to brief the senior members of the Foreign Affairs Committee on the Iran oil exports and our sanctions. And on the other hand, I want to be here. So I will be briefer than usual. I'm Congressman Brad Sherman from America's best named city, Sherman Oaks. I'm pleased to be with so many colleagues and friends from the National Council of Resistance of Iran and the Organization of Iranian American Communities as we work someday to visit, or for many of you return, to a democratic, secular, peaceful, non-nuclear Iran. I'm honored to be with Miriam Rajavi, the President-elect of the National Council of Resistance in Iran. It was good to speak to you by phone just last month. This bloodthirsty regime occupying Tehran is a threat not only to all the people in Iran, but to the region and the world. That is why I've joined with my friend and fellow Californian Tom McClintock in introducing the resolution that was introduced today, calling, of course, for a democratic, secular, non-nuclear Iran, consistent with the 10 points that Miriam Rajavi has put forward. This legislation has 150 members introducing it, including, I might add, 50 Democrats. So I want to thank everyone here who's involved, and I realize it's been a long time. that you've been fighting for a free Iran. We need to keep working on it. We need a U.S. government that supports all of the groups that are working for a democratic Iran. We have to remember 1988 and the massacre that occurred of so many political prisoners back then. And I've been working with you for 28 years, and I say I'm going to work with you for another 28 years, but we're going to get this done much, much sooner than that. But we'll be working with a democratic Iran. We'll be working on on good relations between the two countries. There will always be problems, and we will find solutions. And finally, we've seen this regime lose a lot of strength in Hezbollah, lose the Assad regime. They are hopefully on their last ropes, and I want to visit Iran. It's a beautiful country with such an incredible history. I don't think the current government is going to invite me, but I hope the next government will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. And now it's my honor to introduce the leader of the Iranian opposition, the president-elect of the National Council of Resistance in Iran, Mrs. Mariam Rajavi. Mrs. Rajavi.
Chairman McClintock, Chairman Steve Cohen, co-chairs of the Iran Human Rights and Democracy Caucus, honorable members of the Human Rights and Democracy Ashraf and Iranian Women's Caucuses. I'm very happy for having the opportunity to share the latest developments in my enchained homeland in one of the most sensitive periods of its history with the U.S. House of Representatives. And hello, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presence. Let me first pay tribute to Dr. Alejo Vidal-Quadras, former Vice President of the European Parliament, who was the target of an attempted assassination for his support for the Iranian resistance. Honorable representatives, allow me to begin by this. The situation of the Iranian society is explosive. During its 46-year rule, the religious fascism has never been so weak and fragile. The mullahs are surrounded from all sides by a society that is filled with anger and rebellion, by resistance units, by selfless and rebellious youth, and because of its bankrupt economy and corruption in the government, particularly after the overthrow of the brutal dictatorship of Assad and the collapse of the regime's strategic depth in the region. The regime is trying to preserve its shameful rule through widespread executions in Iran and by creating fear. Behruz Ehsani, one of the supporters of the MEK, after learning of his death sentence, said, "I will not bargain for my life. I'm prepared to give my life for the people of Iran to be free." Over the past 4 decades, this regime has executed more than 100,000 people on political groups. This book shows more than 20,000 of them. We would greatly welcome it if the regime were to change its behavior through negotiations, because any form of retreat accelerates the regime's downfall. But such an expectation is an illusion. On February 4, Khamenei said, "Negotiations are neither wise nor intelligent nor honorable." Over the past 4 decades, the regime has used negotiations as a tool for deception to continue its nuclear weapons program and its destructive policies in the region. The Iranian people's desire and the only solution to the Iranian crisis is the regime's overthrow by the Iranian people. Overthrowing the regime does not happen by itself. Although comprehensive sanctions have a considerable impact by weakening the regime, but they do not lead to its overthrow. An organized resistance and a force on the ground are the necessary elements to do the job. The People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran and the Iranian Resistance's nationwide network inside the country with the resistance units where women play a pioneering role, undertake brave and daring activities. In confronting a misogynist regime, women play the leading role. These resistance units are Iran's freedom fighters and the driving force for change. Any decisive policy on the Iranian regime needs to recognize the role of the Iranian resistance in order to be effective and lead to the liberation of Iran and the region from a terrorist fundamentalist regime. The right to resistance is recognized by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and American Declaration of Independence. Honorable representatives, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, with over 450 members from various tendencies, has been the most enduring political coalition in Iran's history. The NCRI has programs and specific plans for women's rights and freedoms, autonomy of nationalities, equality of followers of all religions, separation of religion and the state, and a non-nuclear Iran. I've always emphasized that we are not seeking to seize power, but to transfer it to its rightful owners, namely the people of Iran and their votes. The NCRI has a plan of action for the post-Mullahs Iran, outlining the roadmap for the transfer of power. The establishment of a provisional government, which will remain in power for a maximum of 6 months following the overthrow of the regime, its primary responsibility will be to organize free and fair elections for National and Constituent Assembly. Once the Constituent Assembly is formed, the provisional government will step down. Sovereignty will be transferred to the people's representatives in the Constituent Assembly, who will form a new government for a 2-year term tasked with drafting, approving, and conducting a referendum on the constitution of the new republic. The source of the policy mistakes regarding Iran over the past 4 decades has been ignoring the Iranian people by the failure to recognize this organized resistance and the existence of a democratic alternative. The resolution you introduced today presents a principled policy that emphasizes the Iranian people's desire to reject both religious and monarchic dictatorship, recognizing the rights of the Iranian people, the protesters, and the resistance units to confront the IRGC and repressive forces to bring about change and establish a democratic, secular, peaceful, and non-nuclear republic for the future of Iran. In these circumstances, a firm policy should include a series of necessary steps. First, activating the snapback mechanism leading to re-implementation of all the UN Security Council resolutions and the complete shutting down of the regime's entire nuclear program. Second, placing this regime under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter due to its threats to global peace and security. And third, recognizing the Iranian people's resistance for regime change and the resistance units fight against the IRGC. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rajavi. I'm now going to recognize the members of the Iran Human Rights and Democracy Caucus and invite them to say a few words and ask any questions they may have of Mrs. Rajavi. And we'll begin with Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren from California.
Well, first, thank you so much, Mrs. Rajavi, for your testimony today, but also for your tremendous leadership in this fight for freedom in Iran. I want to thank you for that. As you know, we have strong bipartisan opposition here in the Congress against Iran's human rights violations, their malign regional activities, their nuclear ambitions. They have supported militia groups in Gaza, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, and others. They've exacerbated the conflicts, and this is in addition to the oppression they are engaging in Iran itself. I just want to say the examples of the heroism of the Iranian people, especially the women and young people, inspire us, courageously rising up against this oppressive regime and exercising their fundamental freedoms, and the Iranian government's reaction to these peaceful protesters. The violence and the force is abominable and something we all oppose. As you know, I'm the co-chair of the Iranian Women's Congressional Caucus, and I want to especially recognize the women of Iran for their courage and for their vision. I admire them so greatly. We know that change must occur in Iran itself, but it's important to be part of this bipartisan group so that the people of Iran seeking freedom know that they have advocates and friends who will stand up for them outside of Iran itself. So I just want to thank you, and I have one or two questions. I'm wondering if you can comment on the role that women's leadership plays in Iran's ongoing struggle for a free, democratic, non-nuclear, secular republic, and what role will women play once we succeed in transitioning to a democracy after the fall of this dictatorship?
Thank you. Now, I'm sure that in future in Iran, the women has a key role for leading the society. First, confronting a misogynist regime, women have more potential to overthrow this regime. Second, women have played a big role in the resistance for 45 years. Tens of thousands were imprisoned and tortured. Thousands were executed. Third, women have a strong and leading role in the main opposition, the People's Mujahideen Organization in Iran. Nearly 1,000 women in Ashraf Tiri in Albania are a source of inspiration for Iranian women. In this context, women in Iran today are the leading force for change and also for future a free Iran.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, I know every member has questions. I would like to say thank you for your co-chairmanship of this important group, bipartisan group. Unfortunately, I have another meeting, but my staff, a lawyer on my staff is here who will keep me fully informed. And once again, I want to thank you for your leadership. It's inspiring to me and to many others.
And thank you, Ms. Lofgren, for
Thank
your
you
leadership.
for your solidarity. Thank you very much.
Members will be coming and going as we proceed during the hour. I'm next pleased to introduce Mario Diaz-Balart, who is the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee on National Security, State, and Related Programs. They basically fund all of the foreign affairs of the United States.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman McClintock, thank you for doing this very important meeting. It is a privilege to be in the video presence of Mrs. Rajavi, who is one of those people that inspires us all and who inspires the world and lets the world understand that the cause of a free Iran is well, it's living, it's active, and it will succeed. You know, I could spend hours talking about example after example, Mr. Chairman, of just the horrors that terrorist regime in Iran has caused to its own people and to the world, and obviously even to the national security interest of the United States. I'm a firm believer that the United States and the world is safer when the United States is not confused as to who our allies are and who our adversaries are. And let's be very clear. The regime in Iran is a pariah. It is a murderous, terrorist regime, and we should not be shy about admitting what we all know, that a change in regime in Iran is a service to humanity, and we should not be shy about expressing that openly. So very clearly, my message, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to the Iranian people who have struggled for so many years bravely and have not stopped fighting and working for that inevitable day of freedom of Iran, that Iran will be free because of the heroes within Iran and the diaspora who day in and day out not only dream but work and sacrifice for that inevitable day. And so thank you all for doing this. It's a privilege to be able to spend this time with you. Mr. Chairman, is it appropriate for me to ask a question at this time?
Absolutely.
Thank you. If I may, a question to Mrs. Rajavi, which is, it seems pretty evident that there are growing protests within Iran, and that there seems to be a growing movement of Iranians demanding democratic change. And if you could please just briefly speak to us about, what I see, is that true, that there's a growing movement, and how is that movement? Is it growing? And particularly, it seems that young women and girls are demanding freedom at great risk to themselves. So if you would care to just give us a little bit of a heads up as to what you're seeing in that growing democratic movement within Iran. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Exactly, it's right. The NCRI has a comprehensive plan, and in November I explained the Iranian resistance's roadmap for overthrowing the regime in the European Parliament. This roadmap relies on the resistance network, especially the MEK's resistance units inside Iran. They are active across the country. Their expanding activities aim to break the wall of repression, paving the way for organizing more protests and uprisings, expanding resistance even in prisons, and finally exposing the regime's crimes internationally.
Thank you. Our next member is Congressman Danny Davis of Illinois. Welcome to the caucus.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I am delighted to be here and be a part of this briefing and be a part of this caucus. Let me just commend you, first of all, for the tremendous leadership that you continue to provide and have provided over a period of time. I also want to say to you, Madam, that every time I hear you, I am inspired. I'm what is called an activist all of my adult life, and of course, being an African American whose ancestors were kidnapped and brought to another country, enslaved, the feeling of oppression is something that I have an understanding of. But the largest meeting that I've ever attended in my life, of course, was outside of Paris, France, the longest meeting and the most informative meeting that I've ever experienced. I was delighted to be there. I also want to commend all of you for the continuous resistance, for continuing in the struggle. One of the individuals I admire a great deal said that struggle, strife, and pain are the prerequisites for change. And the way to fight, and the way that you're fighting oppression, knowing that at the end of the fight, there will be the freedom and liberation that you are seeking, and being able to sustain that and keep it going, and keep it going, keep it going, gives people the opportunity to admire you from every vantage point. I do have a question, and the question that I'd like to ask and pose is, how do we convey to young people growing up who may not be as steeped in the history of the movement or of a movement, of an effort, how do we motivate them to be engaged in the struggle just as well, recognizing that their heritage, their lineage is on the line, and they have an opportunity to be change agents?
Thank you very much, Congressman Davis, for your solidarity and for your supporting from the Iranian resistance. You know that the Iranian resistance has a television broadcast 24 hours every day for inside Iran, and a lot of program from all of the history of this resistance broadcast for the new generation, and new generation in Iran, especially the women and youth. They are very sympathetic about this resistance, and now in this situation, I think inside Iran, despite a lot of obstacles, but a new generation can see and can engage the history of this movement. For example, more than 60 years of struggle vis-à-vis two dictatorships, Shah and mullahs, and a lot of sacrifice, a lot of pay the price, and it is very inspiring for the new generation that they see they are the pioneer who sacrifice everything for freedom and democracy, for future of Iran, and for freedom and democracy for all of the people in Iran. And I'm sure that this struggle will continue until the end. The end is overthrow the mullahs regime.
Thank you very much, and as we say in Swahili, a luta continua, which means that the struggle will continue and we will conquer without a doubt. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, for all of your leadership on these issues. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Keith Self, Congressman from the state of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And now that we have three Texans on this end of the dais, I will say that, first of all, thank you for being here with us. And every successful revolution requires a courageous, articulate leader. And I mentioned the Texans because we went through our own Alamo, and we had courageous, articulate leaders that led us through that to be a sovereign nation before we joined the United States. So I applaud your courage. I want to address that I believe that at some point regime change will be regime survival will be paramount. And when that time comes, we talk about a non-nuclear Iran here. I think that they may decide to change that. And if Iran were to go nuclear, it would not only threaten nuclear blackmail or even destruction for some nations, but many other Middle Eastern nations would also want the same capability, and that is a dangerous situation. I returned from the Middle East on Friday, and I am concerned that we are reaching that stage. So I applaud your courage. And I will just say I'm not a member of this caucus, but Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. And I will just say that this is something that bears close watching, and I know that the United States will. I had several assignments in the nuclear world, and this is a dangerous situation. So I applaud your courage, and I ask everyone to keep a close eye on this, because when the regime feels threatened, their survival will be paramount, and who knows what they will do. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Self, for all of your help on this effort. And now I'm pleased to introduce our next Texan, Congressman Randy Weber. He's a very shy man, so bear with him as he tries to get out of his shell.
On test. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listen, it's a pleasure to be here, Madam Rajavi. It's good to see you again. You know, I'm thinking your initials, Maryam Rajavi, MR, might mean much resistance. What do y'all think? Huh? Come on now, y'all. I got to get y'all engaged. Colonel Self is correct. Iran is on its back heels. Y'all know that, right? We are at a special time in history, especially in the Middle East. Iran is back on its heels. They have been weakened. They have lost credibility and lost power in Syria. I was over there with Keith Self and his lovely bride, with my daughter actually went with us this time. And we paid close attention to what was being said about Iran and those countries around there. Now is the time, right? Come on, I got to get y'all. Come on, is it too close to after dinner? What's the deal here? Now is the time. We strike. There's an old saying, Texas saying, right, Keith? You strike when the iron is hot. Some of y'all heard that. Okay. So NCRI, National Council for Resistance of Iran, is what that stands for. And I'm going to come up with a new acronym if I can. And it's going to be this, Madam Rajavi. Now, continue resistance, Iranians. Now is the time. Did I mention now's the time? This is the time. I want to say thank you to all the patriots out here. Thank you, Madam Rajavi, for all that you've inspired. And I can't say enough about it. You know, we had Resolution 1148 last year. We're going to come out with another one. We're going to get a better one. And we're going to get more people involved and more help. So keep the faith, keep fighting, because help is on the way. If I can paraphrase, now is the time. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Congressman Weber. Thank you very much for your suggestion, for your talent, for your words. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, now is the time.
In American history, Texas is legendary for its heroic resistance to tyranny and oppression. So I think you can say there's a lot of Texas in the Iranian resistance. And thank you for everything you've done, Mr. Weber. And now our next Texan, Congressman Lance Goodman.
Thank you all so much, and thank you to the many people in this audience that I have met over the years. And Madam Rajavi, thank you. I believe we last spoke in Paris personally, and I want to thank you for all you've done. This 10-point plan is something that we have all been very supportive of for so many years, and I believe it is the future for Iran. And I am so grateful for the thought that you've put into this, and for the support that you've built up around the United States Congress and across America and the world for what you and all of us believe in, and that is a free and democratic Iran. I also, Madam Rajavi, I wanted you to talk, if you would, please, because we get this question a lot. What is your plan? What is the plan for a free Iran? What is the plan for the movement in the coming months and years? What do you envision once we are successful and we have a free Iran?
We advocate for a republic where the people decide their own destiny. We reject both monarchy and theocracy. As I said in my remarks, we are not seeking to seize power, but to transfer it to its rightful owners, namely the people of Iran and their votes. To this end, the NCRI, many years ago, published its platform, which advocates a pluralistic, multi-party republic based on free elections, separation of religion and the state, gender equality, a market economy, regional coexistence, and a non-nuclear Iran. Our program also includes autonomy for Kurdish and other nationalities within the territorial integrity of Iran, abolishing the Mullah's Sharia law, establishing a modern judiciary, and eliminating discrimination against followers of different religions. Very short.
Well, thank you so much
And
for that.
NCRI has a comprehensive plan and the necessary organizational structure to peacefully transition power to the Iranian people after the regime's overthrow. After the regime's fall, a provisional government will be formed for a maximum of 6 months. Its job is to hold elections for a constituent assembly. Then power will be given to the elected representatives of the people. This assembly has 2 main tasks: writing a new constitution, forming a transitional government to run daily affairs within a maximum of 2 years until the new constitution is written and put to a referendum. Many top Iranian experts in the US, Europe, and inside Iran are working with us on this plan for the transition and future reconstruction of Iran. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Rajavi. I'll just conclude by once again thanking you and encouraging my fellow Americans and my fellow members of Congress to continue to stand with the Iranian people. And I appreciate all of the those of Iranian descent that are in this room and around the United States that are fighting for your country back home. So many have suffered for so long, and we are with you in this fight. The American people stand with you, and thank you, Madam Rajavi, for your leadership. We're looking forward to a free Iran in the very near future.
Thank you, Mr. Gooden. Mrs. Rajavi, my question of you is simply this. What do you need from the United States, and what advice can you give to the civilized nations of the world to bring maximum pressure on this regime?
First, let me clarify what we do not want. We do not seek U.S. or any other foreign military intervention to bring about regime change in Iran, nor do we ask for money or weapons. The overthrow of this regime is the responsibility of the Iranian people and the organized resistance. What we do want is a firm policy against the regime and support for the Iranian people's demand for change, recognizing their right to overthrow the regime. Specifically, this includes acknowledging the right of the resistance's fighters, the resistance units, to confront the IRGC and the regime's repressive forces.
Well, thank you very much.
Once again, thank
We'll
you.
now move to the second
Congressman
portion of this forum. At this point, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Alejo Vidal-Quadras. If you'd like to take the chair there. Mr. Vidal-Quadras is a veteran Spanish politician, former vice president of the European Parliament until 2014. He's been a longtime supporter of Madame Rajavi's movement and was actually targeted for assassination by the Iranian regime. Professor, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Clinton and distinguished members of the House of Representatives, including co-chairs of the caucuses, for inviting me to this hearing today. Special greetings to my good friend, Mariam Rajavi, the President-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. I am deeply honored to testify before this esteemed caucus hearing. I extend my profound gratitude for your significant role in supporting the NCRI and the MEK during their most vulnerable and difficult moments. My efforts, alongside with those of my European colleagues, have been dedicated to amplifying your initiatives, aiming to establish a robust and effective policy to counter the Iranian regime's oppression of its citizens, its aggressive pursuit of nuclear weapons, and its expanding terrorism, which now targets not only Iranian dissidents, but also politicians in America and in Europe. My personal ordeal with Iranian state-sponsored terrorism allows me to participate in this discussion with a real and direct knowledge of the subject. As you may know, I survived an assassination attempt in Madrid by a gunman, a French-Tunisian professional killer whose name is Mereth Ayari. He shot me in the face at point-blank range on the 9th of November 2023. A fortuitous turn of my head, something similar to President Trump when he moved his head. So this turning of my head and the subsequent jamming of his weapon allowed me to escape with my life. This incident marks a sinister evolution of the regime's approach to terrorism, now engaging with organized crime syndicates, mafias, and this to target dissidents and foreign nationals. This tactic provides them with plausible deniability and represents a grave, serious new threat. I must say, however, that if the regime intended this vile act to silence me, it has utterly failed. Far from being intimidated, I am now even more resolute in my commitment to intensify my efforts to witness the end of this oppressive and criminal regime. From a European perspective, it is clear that our long-standing policy of engagement and appeasement with the Iranian regime has not only failed, but has actively harmed our interests. It is imperative for the security and strategic interests of Europe and, of course, the broader Western democracies to pursue all non-kinetic measures to facilitate the downfall of this brutal tyranny. The responsibility to overthrow the regime rests with the Iranian people and their organized resistance, spearheaded by the NCRI and MEK. Needless to say that any contribution from other opposition groups genuinely committed to democracy in Iran must be welcome. Of course, there is much that the United States and European nations can do to accelerate this process. We must urgently recognize and support the Iranian people's right to change their government. This support is not just an ideal, it is a crucial and timely necessity for regional stability. Contrary to the regime's assertions, there exists a viable alternative to the current theocracy. The National Council of Resistance of Iran presents a structured and democratic option articulated through a detailed 10-point plan that any democrat in the world could sign. This plan is not only theoretical, it has been actively implemented among their members and consistently promoted as a vision for Iran's future. The NCRI has never asked for boots on the ground or something similar. I was pleased to observe that the resolution introduced by Mr. McClintock, which has garnered significant bipartisan support, acknowledges the capabilities and visionary plans of the Iranian resistance. This acknowledgement will undoubtedly resonate in Europe as well. And I can assure you this is absolutely necessary, that it resonates in Europe, because Europe sometimes has her ears a little, let's say, not in perfect form, you know. The regime's collapse would not cause chaos, but instead remove the primary source of instability in the region and, I dare say, in the world. It is time to end the West's 4-decade-long policy of appeasement, which has only served to empower the regime's authoritarian and destabilizing agenda. As we look to the future, a democratic republic in Iran, free from religious or monarchical dictatorships, has the potential to be a constructive and decisive force in the Middle East for centuries to come. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Professor. Mr. Goodman? Okay. Well, let me just ask you one quick question. You're a victim of violence of the Iranian tyranny. We all know of the escalating violence that the mullahs are perpetrating against their own people. What words of encouragement can you share with the people of Iran today?
Excuse me, Mr. President. Could you repeat the question? Because
what words of
since
encouragement?
the attack, I have lost about 40% of my hearing capacity, you know.
What words of encouragement would you like to offer to the people of Iran who are facing the same violence that you stood down on the streets of Madrid?
Well, what I would like to say on this occasion to the people of Iran is that they must have hope and trust, because the regime is in a moment of extreme weakness and fragility, and its end is coming. They must resist, they must activate their protest. They must support the thousands of resistance units that exist in the country with remarkable effectiveness, and be confident that this horrible situation they suffer, they have been suffering for 45 years, will not last forever. On the contrary, the end of this shameful regime is very close. Thank you, Mr.
I think it is too, and thank you for joining us today. I do want to make a very important announcement regarding this caucus and its support for the people of Iran. I'm pleased to announce, as has already been referenced, that we have just introduced today House Resolution 166, co-sponsored by Congressman Brad Sherman and myself, and joined by 150 members of the House of Representatives as original co-sponsors, representing a broad cross-section of the House of Representatives, Democrats and Republicans alike, united for the freedom of Iran. This resolution endorses the 10-point plan of the NCRI. It stands behind it and the people of Iran and their vital work, and it pledges to support that work until Iran has been restored to its rightful place among the free, prosperous, and peaceful nations of the world. And now, Madam Rajavi, I'd like to introduce you again to make a few closing thoughts.
Congressman McClintock and Congressman Godden, I would like to thank you as well as all the members of Congress who have co-sponsored the resolution submitted today. Is a very important work. Thank you for all your effort. It's very important and makes realistic policy recommendations. I would also like to thank again Dr. Al-Khouidal-Quadras and Dear Amparo for being present at today's hearing. As I said, we are an independent resistance movement fighting the religious fascism ruling Iran. As I have said it before, we are not seeking to seize power, but to transfer it to its rightful owners, namely the people of Iran. We want the people of Iran to have freedom of choice and the possibility to elect their true representatives to govern. We are not seeking help from any country to overthrow the regime. Regime change by the Iranian people and its resistance is within reach. Unfortunately, years of a policy of appeasement have helped the regime stay in power. However, now is the time for a new policy on Iran and for the world to side with the Iranian people and their desire for a free and democratic republic. A democratic Iran is necessary for peace and stability in the Middle East and the world. Thank you all, and God bless you. Once again, thank you very much, Congressman McClintock and Congressman Godden.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Rajavi, and I want to thank all of you who are here today, all of you around the world who have worked so hard for the liberation of Iran. That day is coming. I think it is coming soon. So let us strive to meet next year in Tehran. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Yes,